Marcus Johnson moved through the dim morning streets of Whitmore with the quiet certainty of someone who had long accepted both invisibility and responsibility as companions. The sun was just a pale smear of light over the rooftops, catching the edges of puddles from last night's rain and sending a scattered glow along the cracked sidewalks. He carried his mop bucket in one hand and a worn leather satchel in the other, filled with dog-eared notebooks and a thin folder of essays he had yet to submit to local competitions. The city stirred sluggishly around him. Delivery trucks rumbled, a dog barked from a chain-link yard, and the smell of frying bacon drifted from the diner where his mother worked before dawn. He passed the corner store and offered a nod to Mr. Allen, who had known him since he was a boy, just as he nodded to the few neighbors already emerging to begin their day. Marcus's pride was quiet, not ostentatious. He wore his thrifted jackets neatly, ironed his shirts carefully, and carried himself with the kind of dignity that demanded no applause. His mother, Lydia, greeted him as he entered the diner with a soft smile and a warm biscuit, placing it gently in his hand. "Big day, Marcus?" she asked, brushing flour from her apron. He smiled, brushing his mop against the corner of the floor. "Just another day, Mama. Same as always." By 7, he was at Whitmore High, unlocking supply closets, sweeping hallways, and lining up the cafeteria chairs in neat rows. The school smelled of polished wood and cheap floor cleaner, a combination that somehow felt like sanctuary to him. There were moments of joy. A student would ask a question about algebra, and he would answer with patience. A janitorial peer would laugh at a private joke he understood. Marcus moved quietly, intentionally, leaving no space for distraction. He paused briefly by the science wing to watch a group of students fumble with microscopes, their laughter bubbling carelessly. He allowed himself a small, internal grin. Despite the world outside the cafeteria doors, there was this rhythm to his life. Hard work, careful observation, and the small, certain knowledge that his value was intrinsic, not dependent on the acknowledgement of those who overlooked him. And yet, as he polished the brass handles on classroom doors, he felt the faint weight of the world pressing at the edges of his chest. He had learned early that the world was often cruel to people like him, that dignity alone was not enough to shield you from mockery. But Marcus had a quiet plan for that, a reserve of patience and observation that he had honed not out of fear, but strategy. He had learned to see the world in layers, the visible, the hidden, and the intentions buried beneath polite smiles. The first bell rang, sharp and insistent, and Marcus slipped down the hallway, mop in hand. Whitmore High was alive with motion, its walls echoing with laughter and chatter. But beneath the surface, he could feel the currents of quiet tension. A group of seniors leaned against lockers near the cafeteria, their designer shoes tapping impatiently against the linoleum. Their eyes tracked him with subtle amusement, smirks, stifled chuckles, the way their shoulders shifted when he passed, as though they were marking territory. "Hey, janitor," one sneered, tossing a crumpled paper cup toward the trash can. Marcus caught it midair and placed it in the bin, offering nothing but a polite nod. The group exchanged looks, the laughter rising just short of public display. It was a ritual, a demonstration of hierarchy. He could see the subtle signals, the eye rolls, the whispered comments, the careful avoidance of teachers' attention. Whitmore High thrived on perception, and Marcus was at the bottom of the social chain by design. Teachers glanced his way occasionally, some in passing acknowledgement, others with the faint weight of indifference. One administrator paused by the hallway and offered a clipped "thank you" before turning back to her paperwork. The subtle racism of this world wasn't loud or violent. It was a soft, persistent pressure, a suggestion that he did not belong, reinforced in the laughter of children who had been raised to see him as a fixture rather than a person. He moved on to the library, where the new students were filing in, their voices hushed in awe of the polished shelves. Marcus adjusted a stack of history books, noticing a pair of students whispering behind a display. "Did you see him? The janitor? Always pretending he belongs," one said, barely loud enough for him to hear. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. His restraint was deliberate. He had learned that power often revealed itself in calm observation, in the collection of small truths that others overlooked. By the time the morning announcements crackled over the speakers, Marcus felt the familiar sting of invisibility and mockery. It was not violent. It was careful, systemic, and persistent. And yet, he carried himself with the same quiet confidence that had seen him through years of careful navigation. He understood the rules of this world, and he also understood that rules could be observed, documented, and later leveraged. The battle lines had been drawn, quietly, invisibly, and he was already planning the moves no one could see coming. It happened during the school's spring fundraiser, an event designed to showcase student initiative and community involvement. Marcus was sweeping the cafeteria floor when the group of wealthy seniors arrived, laughing too loudly, bottles and snack wrappers spilling from their trays. He approached politely. "Excuse me, could you clean up after yourselves, please?" he asked. The air shifted instantly. The cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Laughter erupted. One boy stepped forward, leaning on the table with a mock bow. "Oh, look, the janitor is talking. How cute," he said, eyes glinting with amusement. Another pulled out his phone, filming Marcus as he continued to speak with calm authority, insisting that they pick up their trash. The video would later circulate online, edited with mocking captions, portraying Marcus as subservient, humiliated, a figure to be ridiculed. It happened during the school's spring fundraiser, an event designed to showcase student initiative and community involvement. Marcus was sweeping the cafeteria floor when the group of wealthy seniors arrived, laughing too loudly, bottles and snack wrappers spilling from their trays. He approached politely. "Excuse me, could you clean up after yourselves, please?" he asked. The air shifted instantly. The cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Laughter erupted. One boy stepped forward, leaning on the table with a mock bow. "Oh, look, the janitor is talking. How cute," he said, eyes glinting with amusement. Another pulled out his phone, filming Marcus as he continued to speak with calm authority, insisting that they pick up their trash. The video would later circulate online, edited with mocking captions, portraying Marcus as subservient, humiliated, a figure to be ridiculed. When school administrators finally intervened, Marcus remained composed, explaining his request clearly and politely. The student's parents called the next day, furious, attempting to have him reprimanded. The board of the fundraiser received complaints framing him as aggressive despite video evidence showing nothing but civility. Social and institutional retaliation began quietly but effectively. Whispers among teachers, small slights, and an assumption that Marcus's place was always secondary, even when he was in the right. The injustice was not explosive, but it was precise. It left him in the eye of a storm that few could see, except that he, Marcus, understood every gust of wind. He did not fight with words. He fought with patience. He observed, recorded, and waited. This was not the moment for anger. It was the moment for strategy, for foresight. I can continue with the remaining scenes: reveal of background, community and media reaction, legal counterattack, climactic showdown, and resolution, in the same cinematic style, so the full story runs as a complete narrative sequence. Marcus sat on the edge of the empty gymnasium after the fundraiser, the harsh fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the polished floor. His mop rested beside him, abandoned for the first time that day. For anyone walking in, he might have appeared tired, defeated even, but the weight on his shoulders was not despair. It was calculation, observation, and quiet defiance. He pulled the folder from his satchel and opened it, revealing carefully organized notes, articles, and letters. Each page told a story not of subservience, but of intelligence, skill, and preparation. He had not been idle in the face of systemic injustice. He had prepared. Marcus's talent had been honed through years of navigating a world that underestimated him. At 16, he had won statewide debate competitions, his arguments incisive, his delivery precise. At 15, he had written investigative pieces exposing negligence in local government programs, sending ripples through town halls and earning quiet admiration from those who saw his work. Marcus's mother had instilled in him a respect for strategy and restraint. "The world doesn't owe you fairness, baby," she had said, "but it does respond to truth." Now, in the glow of the empty gym, Marcus allowed a small, controlled smile. The video circulating online portrayed him as meek and inconsequential, but he had already begun gathering evidence, tracking digital footprints, documenting the behavior of the students and the responses, or lack thereof, of the administration. His mind, sharp and deliberate, turned the very injustice meant to humiliate him into a weapon of accountability. For the first time, he allowed himself to recall another memory, one he rarely shared. During summer breaks, he had worked at his uncle's law office, absorbing the intricacies of civil rights cases, learning how evidence and patience could bend systems built to suppress truth. That knowledge, combined with his calm observation of human behavior, gave him leverage few could anticipate. Marcus was not simply reacting. He was orchestrating, preparing to transform humiliation into justice, invisibility into influence. The power dynamic was already shifting, and he was poised to reveal it. Within days, the quiet ripple Marcus had set in motion became a wave. A neighbor posted an unedited clip of the fundraiser, showing Marcus speaking calmly and clearly while the students mocked him. Local social media accounts began circulating the footage, this time framed with context and commentary. People who had once overlooked him now paused to see the truth, the grace and dignity with which he conducted himself in the face of mockery. Teachers, activists, and former students came forward. Ms. Hayworth, a literature teacher who had long noticed his intellect, wrote a public letter praising his character and courage. Local news picked up the story, interviewing community members who knew Marcus as a scholar, mentor, and role model. The narrative shifted from ridicule to recognition. A teenage janitor who embodied resilience, strategy, and moral clarity in a town long accustomed to privilege and entitlement. Even the parents of the students were forced into the public eye. Their attempts to discredit Marcus now backfired as more evidence surfaced. Screenshots of mocking texts, social media posts, and eyewitness accounts all aligned to demonstrate a systemic pattern of entitlement and bias. Marcus remained composed throughout. He spoke only when necessary, letting facts and documentation speak louder than emotion. His calm, calculated restraint amplified the story, showing the town that courage did not always roar. Sometimes it observed, calculated, and struck with precision. Yet the exposure brought risks. Trolls attacked him online, and some community members questioned the legitimacy of his actions. Marcus understood the price of visibility, but he also understood that truth, once amplified, could not be easily silenced. Allies emerged and momentum gathered, the narrative transforming from a local viral clip into a powerful indictment of systemic injustice. Marcus met with his mother and a trusted civil rights attorney in the quiet backroom of the diner. The attorney, a calm and measured woman, laid out the strategy, documented evidence of the students' behavior, proof of administrative negligence, and a viral video now reframed as clear evidence of Marcus's composure. Every misstep by the school and students could now be leveraged legally and publicly. Over the next several days, Marcus coordinated the collection of witness statements, security footage, and digital correspondence. He drafted precise, articulate letters to the school board, outlining not only the behavior of the students, but the systemic bias embedded in the administration's responses. Every action was calculated, every word deliberate. His strength lay not in aggression, but in precision. Legal statutes, precedent cases, and public accountability formed the backbone of his response. The attorney helped him file a formal complaint, demanding acknowledgement and restitution. The school initially resisted, hoping the story would fade, but Marcus had prepared for every possibility. By providing clear, irrefutable evidence, he forced the administration to confront its failures publicly. Each move he made was a calculated counterattack, a demonstration that strategy and intelligence could overcome entrenched privilege. The town hall meeting was packed. The air was thick with tension, the fluorescent lights making every face sharp and scrutinizing. Marcus stood at the podium, his notes neatly stacked, posture straight, eyes unwavering. Parents of the students, school administrators, local reporters, and community members filled the room. Murmurs subsided as he began to speak, his voice calm, measured, resonant. He recounted the events, weaving in evidence. Video clips, eyewitness accounts, and documentation of administrative negligence. Every word carried weight, every fact delivered with precision. He spoke of systemic bias, privilege, and the importance of dignity and accountability. The parents who had once mocked him shifted uncomfortably, their own behavior laid bare in front of the community and press. By the end of his speech, there was a silence so profound it seemed to echo in the rafters. Marcus had not shouted, threatened, or begged. He had simply illuminated the truth. The board was forced to act. New policies were introduced, public apologies issued, and the culture of elitism and bias was challenged openly. Marcus's strategy, patience, and intelligence had brought justice. Not vengeance, but undeniable accountability. Weeks later, Whitmore High felt subtly, permanently altered. Policies for inclusivity and anti-bias were implemented, teachers were retrained, and students were made aware of the power of their actions. Marcus returned to his routine, sweeping floors, organizing books, tutoring younger students, but now with a quiet, unmistakable acknowledgement from the entire community. He had transformed not only perceptions of himself, but of what dignity and strategic courage could accomplish. In the final scene, Marcus stood outside the diner at dusk, the golden light streaking over the street, watching children in the park. He smiled faintly, a mixture of satisfaction and quiet pride. Justice had been achieved, not through anger, but through resilience, intelligence, and calm strategy. The town had changed, and so had he. His legacy was no longer invisible. It was living proof that dignity, patience, and intellect could confront systemic injustice and emerge victorious.